Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSPmagazine. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
Marco,
Sean,
is your cognition rolling, or
it's a little rusty?
Is the coffee helping?
The cogs are a little rusted. I need to. I just did some coffee to see if I could. I don't know. Is a coffee a solvent? I don't know for rust.
A loosening agent.
Yeah. And I never tried that. It certainly loosed my brain quite a bit. So if I'm a little hyperactive right now, that's why. But the good news is that I don't need to be hyperactive. I don't need to entertain, because Sean, we have a host of one of our show that we had a pleasure to talk before RSA conference not too long ago, and all of a sudden, boom. We have a podcast.
A guest turned host, and on a topic that's in the cogs everywhere. I think it's the things that, I don't know if it's keeping the cogs moving or slowing them down. Well, I guess time will tell that. But Hutch is with us. Hutch, thanks for being on.
Hey, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, this is super cool, and we're thrilled to have your show, Cybercognition, on as part of the podcast network. And I think the stars aligned. I know you come from the world of space as well, so the stars aligned. I'll say for you to talk to an audience about AI and all that comes with it. So before we get into it, though, I mean, we're gonna talk about your show, of course. That's kind of the whole purpose of this, to kind of give folks a taste for what's coming. But I think it's important for them to know who Hutch is. So maybe I think start back with some of the early days, maybe even before some of the space stuff you did. How did you get into technology, and what kind of brought you to this point where AI is such an important topic for you?
So I was actually originally, when I got out of high school, I went into school at University of Houston in Texas and was majoring in philosophy. And one of my favorite classes while I was in there was symbolic logic. And I remember at the time I was putting myself through school, actually working as an overnight customer service manager at Walmart. And there was a guy that frequently came in as a customer overnight. And it was one of those people that has ultimately ends up having a significant impact on your total life trajectory, but you don't realize it at the time. But he came in one day and he saw my symbolic logic book that I was working through. And he had a technology background himself. And he asked me to explain some of the stuff that I was doing. And a lot of it was kind of the same things: if, then, disjunctions, conjunction logic, stuff like that. And honestly, I don't even remember what language he was working out of, but he kind of took the exact problem that I was working with, and he's like, you're essentially doing coding. And on paper writes out, I think it was JavaScript, just writes out more or less the coding equivalent of what I was doing. So I had always had kind of an interest in technology, but that was really what kind of made me take the deep dive and start playing around with it a lot more. I ultimately ended up making a move to a company that was a help desk job for a triple play company that did the television, internet, and home phone service over. It was one of the first ones, fiber optic to the home. So very early on, before its time, we had all kinds of problems. The technology wasn't ready. Nobody knew how to handle fiber. We had people that closed the cabinets on the fiber and broke all of the connections. So the company ended up going under, and I was without a job, along with close to 100 people that worked at the company with me, who were all looking for more or less the same jobs in the area. So without any kind of academic credentials, I kind of scrambled to find anything, and ultimately ended up joining the Air Force, and ended up being a fantastic opportunity for me. I got access to technology that I otherwise would have never been able to play around with. Because unlike many of the other military branches in the Air Force, you actually get good technology and not hand-me-downs. And not a knock on anybody else, just the horror stories that I've heard from some of my friends in the other branches. So the rest is history. I did a lot of work in the cybersecurity field, and also a lot of interest in, personally, a lot of interest in social psychology, philosophy, obviously, given my background and what I was originally looking at, and also artificial intelligence. So for the artificial intelligence side, I started playing around with it probably about a decade ago, with trying to master the markets and make myself rich through day trading. So it did all kinds of different models with scikit-learn, Python. From there, started also playing around with language models and testing some different security threats and risks around those. And had been doing that for a long time. Actually was working with some of the early GPT models before ChatGPT came out. So I feel like in that regard, I got a good head start on what now everybody is paying attention to. And now that it is becoming once again such a hot topic, I thought it would be a great opportunity to take what is otherwise a passion and interest of mine and build out this podcast and really start addressing, for me, what is some of the major issues related to society and the social and cultural impacts involved with the integration of artificial intelligence into our daily lives.
No lack of conversations to have there, for sure.
No, that's for me. It's just like kicking the door open for me to start talking for hours about this. But that's why I'm going to leave you go first, Sean.
Well, I almost wanted to ask the question, given your background. I mean, when we talk about technology, and certainly in the cybersecurity world, we talk about weakness and vulnerabilities and the opportunity to exploit those for gains in a number of different ways, a lot of which are technology oriented, but some do cross over into the physical world and the greater societal impact. But do we, so it's easy, certainly coming from this field, it's easy for me to make that view of vulnerability to exploit. Do humans have the same weaknesses in their intelligence, and yet we don't talk about them that way? So I'm kind of wondering, for people who can kind of see my hands on the screen, the weakness in intelligence, human versus machine or artificial, and maybe even the ability to exploit it. Are they on the same level or different?
I think there are a lot of parallels. There's also a lot of differences too, but I think some of the parallels that definitely stand out for me with artificial intelligence and machine learning, no matter how you try to tailor that data to avoid it, there are inevitably going to be biases associated with that. And I think that is absolutely true of human cognition as well. We are naturally inclined to make judgments based on a finite number of experiences that we've had in our life. And those experiences inevitably lead to biased decision-making. And so I think in that regard, we have a vulnerability that's comparable to what you see in artificial intelligence. I think for some of the earlier artificial intelligence models, stuff like vanishing gradients also could probably be compared in some regards to forgetful memory, or something that was once relevant in your and present in your memory, that and vanishing gradients, of course, is really one of the or gradients themselves is one of the big factors that's involved in weighting the different connections within neural network systems. And one of the problems that you have, especially when you're going through recurrent analysis of multiple different layers, is that those gradients themselves can increasingly become exceptionally large in the form of exploding gradients, or exceedingly small in the form of vanishing gradients, to where certain factors that previously would have and potentially should be considered in a conclusion will almost become trivial or completely irrelevant because of the fact that those gradient values just kind of build on top of each other through a multiplication process. So I think in that way, you've also got something that is comparable to kind of loss of memory over time, or even in the same regard, if you look at exploding gradients, kind of hyperfixation on certain things, or even analogous to like human paranoia, I guess. So yeah, I think there are definitely a lot of parallels. I think there are other ways that we see significant differences and deviations between human cognition and machines. Obviously, one of them being that machines are extremely analytical. And while I think that that is true of humans as well, I don't think that we are or ever will be capable of doing it on the same scale that systems are. Whereas machines have, or humans have, other vulnerabilities that are more related to our emotional temperaments and our, I guess really for lack of a better word, our sentience that currently does not exist. And I don't expect, based on any of the current models that we're building, will exist anytime in the near future for artificial intelligence.
All right, I'm kind of my brain is less rusted now, and it's going a million miles an hour because
kicking in.
because I mean, this is the stuff I think all day long, and Sean knows it. I think in terms of sociology, philosophy, and how it applies in all of this, and we just started using an artificial intelligence on ITSPmagazine. It's a soft launch. It's based on Chat GPT-4, and it's about all the content that we have. And so it's going to suggest if we talk about something, what our guest and host. And I was writing. We created this character, and I wanted to explain that artificial intelligence really is it's what knows and how it learns something. I don't know if it makes sense to you. So my point is, it's only that because we fed that kind of information, we put some kind of emotions in there, but it's not the human emotion. So as you're talking of all of this, I guess a book that came in my mind was Blink. I don't know if you've ever read Blink, but it's kind of like how it's famous sociologist that wrote it, Mac. I don't know. I'll get to that. But it's about, you have the perception of something, and then you apply logic. And often your first perception, that blink of an eye of maybe an antique expert, knows if something is false or a fake or a true piece of art. They kind of, it before you actually start applying all the logic to see if it's
just based on their unique experience. And
yeah, it's something that you just can't explain. And so
let's see, it's the trained gut, right?
Intuition, right?
Right. What we call intuition, but it's also our own experience, something that kicks in. And when you apply that to a machine, I just went very large on this to say, like you said, I don't think that we can ever replicate this intuition in a machine. So it's up to us to create the machine that we wanted to have.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I think don't get me wrong, the latest generation of artificial intelligence capabilities with transformer architecture are incredible pieces of technology, but they really are just statistical engines that are based on, like you said,
right, probability, right,
tuning of it, and nothing more than that. And I think, and that's actually that's actually what my first episode is really about, is people's tendency.
I was going there.
Oh, fair enough. I'll let you
tell me about that. No, tell me about it. Your first episode.
Exactly. So the first episode is the ELISA effect, and it is focused on just that, which so in the 1960s, a researcher named Weizenbaum created what is the first documented chatbot called ELISA. And even then, when people would interact with it, even though the system was extremely simplistic compared to what our technology is capable of today. But even then, people would have a tendency to feel like they are interacting with something that is more than just a mechanical system, a rule-based system. And so what the episode really looks at is kind of the history behind the ELIZA effect, what it is, but also what it means for us in the modern world. Because while it was a factor then back in the 60s, when you introduce the technology that we have today, which really even our modern systems are still rule-based systems. We don't write the rules anymore. We write the systems that themselves write the rules based on the training data that we provide. But there's still, ultimately, there is a mathematical necessity involved in the way that the output is results from the input that is provided and the configurations of the system itself. So unfortunately, because of the complexity of these systems and how impressive they are at mimicking and replicating that sense of intelligence and even sense of emotion and sense of kind of factors that we think of as being uniquely human, because of their capability in doing those things, our tendency to fall for the ELIZA effect is dramatically more than it was then. And you're seeing even extremely intelligent, well-educated people that are starting to speak about these systems as if they are conscious. And I think another thing that we're seeing is a problem with just our day-to-day rhetoric, where we use loaded terms like knows or thinks when referring to these machines, when they don't know anything. They don't think anything. They are programmatically generating output based on input that's providing in there. And so I think there's that tendency to speak about these language systems in that way even further exacerbates that problem that we have of wanting to anthropomorphize these systems, of wanting to assume that there's more under the hood than there actually is.
We want that. That's what it's really driving this. I was reading an article about some researcher at Microsoft that they say, I think it's really becoming sentient. And some other people were like, well, that's what you want it to be. It's kind of like when we see faces everywhere, right?
Some people may want it. Personally, I think the idea is somewhat terrible.
I think it's human to have this creator approach to think, replicate who we are and how other object thinks and so forth. Anyway, a quick note before I pass to Sean is that the book I was talking about was Blink, The Power of Thinking Without Thinking, Malcolm Gladwell. That's the book. So very famous author. I blanked on that. I blinked and blanked on it. That's how it goes. So Sean,
you weren't trained to remember that piece of information.
That what makes me human. I could remember the concept, but I couldn't remember the factual data about that. Right.
Well, because this is such a broad topic, I started with this is my background. I kind of started with the cyber realm of things. Marco went into how human-like it might be, could be, will be, won't be, shouldn't be, right? And those are just two shards on a gigantic iceberg. I don't even know if those are probably above the water shards that we can see and think about, and probably a huge amount below that. So talk to me about kind of the scope of your show. What do you, if you can kind of contain it and give people an idea of where you'll go, how you might weave through some things, what you hope people will get from it by listening to you and guests for some episodes when you choose to have them on.
So the intent of the show is partly to keep people aware of the ongoing trends associated with machine learning and artificial intelligence and how we are seeing those integrated into new capabilities. And that itself is something that is moving tremendously fast, unlike anything that we've seen before. So there's that component of it, but really the part that I'm most passionate about, and the part that I think is going to show through in many of the episodes that I have, and really even in some of the guests that I have in mind that we will have on the show in the future, is speaking to the cultural and social impacts related to artificial intelligence, because I think those are were already significant. If you look at even the older forms of artificial intelligence, where we have integrated machine learning capabilities into the way that we've done targeted advertising and the way that we have created systems that are constantly giving you those instant gratification dopamine hits as you scroll through, and you're delivered content that's uniquely tailored to what appeals to you. So I think we've already seen significant social and cultural impacts related to artificial intelligence. And I think in this next evolution of newer emerging artificial intelligence and generative AI, I think we're really just at the next stage of that. We're seeing an even further push for instant gratification, for having knowledge directly at our fingertips at the very moment that we want it, to be able to instantly create things in our mind just with our words, and have it instantly manifest in front of us. So I think that in that regard, and also in kind of the psychological impact related to having so much more additional capabilities that absent of that technology we would not have, I think we're going to continue to see significant impacts, some good, some bad, related to people's lives, mental health, and the way they interact with others within society.
I want to get your, thanks for that, by the way, because I want to get your thoughts on this, because as you're describing what you're going to talk about and how you're going to kind of talk about it, I'm thinking that we've probably already been living with a lot of AI and didn't know it. For example, I'm sure I talk with a big distributor who sells stuff through Prime, right? For example, and I'm certain that half the time, if not all the time, I'm not actually chatting with a person when I'm on there.
Yeah, Sean, you're absolutely right. Artificial intelligence is already everywhere.
Yeah. So it's been normalized, but probably, and only because I'm in the space that I probably realize that that's happening, right? So I guess have we switched over with GPT-4 and an interface that everybody can now access, and APIs that drive a bunch of new systems, where it's raised awareness again, so that it's surfaced that this is being used? And are we going to reach another point where it's normalized and it kind of goes away?
I think there's a couple things that make this generation of artificial intelligence uniquely different. One is that I think the approachability of it has democratized artificial intelligence. And what I mean by that is that artificial intelligence for decades now has been accessible. There's been open source libraries, there's been capabilities where anybody can play with it, but the bar was much higher because it required a certain amount of technical skill set in order to be able to use that artificial intelligence effectively. With the latest generation of machine learning, specifically with using transformer architecture to build models where the interface is normal human language, it has made systems to where they are usable without any kind of technical background, any kind of expertise. If you can speak human language, and not even just English, because we're starting to see more and more of these models in languages all around the world. If you can speak human language, then you can interface with these systems and you can use them very effectively. So I think that's one reason why this is significantly different than the previous AI that, like you said, is everywhere, but it's under the hood and it's operating behind the scenes based on the choices of a handful of technical companies. The other reason why I think that this is uniquely different is that we are starting to see a consolidation of artificial intelligence capabilities. And what I mean by that is, rather than in the past, we used different types of AI for different capabilities. Convolutional neural networks were used for computer vision purposes. Recurrent neural networks and long short-term memory architecture was used for language models. Different classification and regression algorithms were used for mathematical analysis. Well, with transformers and the type of architecture that ChatGPT and GPT-4 are based off of, it is a multimodal type of artificial intelligence. So basically anything that you can encode into data, not just text, not just words, but audio or pieces of a picture in order to create visual capabilities. We can now use the same type of artificial intelligence for all of these different capabilities. And so rather than having to focus on acceleration and advances in a bunch of different disciplines of artificial intelligence, any new groundbreaking capabilities or advances in the area of transformer architecture, machine learning, and artificial intelligence is going to contribute to AI in every single one of these disciplines. So you also have this accelerator where it's not just kind of a variety of different areas that we're having to increase our capabilities in, but we've got the kind of the traditional exponential growth technology accelerator on top of the fact that everything is now consolidating, and advances in one area mean really advances in all areas.
Wow. So, you know what I was thinking is, remember The Fifth Element, the Luc Besson movie where the fifth element digests an entire amount of culture and learn the language in a few minutes watching TV. And that makes me think like how before we used to refer to the Library of Alexandria, where all the knowledge was, and then the TV and radio, and now there is the internet. Like you just plug into the internet and everything comes together. And I think it's hard for people not to think of this as creating something so powerful because it has all the knowledge of the world. But then can this something so powerful act on it? Is it a Jarvis that goes crazy? Is that some of this sci-fi scenario? So I think it's natural for humans looking at this and be like, holy shit. It's scary, right? So what is your feeling about this with your background in philosophy and your approach with this podcast? I mean, where are you trying to go with this? Are you trying to say, yeah, we need to push pause? Or are you going to be more of, let's welcome it? I don't know.
So that's a tough question because I realistically, I would like to say that if it was feasible to push pause, I would be all for it. The problem is I don't think that it's a realistic solution, because if we push pause, that doesn't mean that everybody's pushing pause. It's nearly impossible to get everybody on the same page as that is concerned. I think, unfortunately, the cat is out of the bag. Pandora's box is open, so to speak. There's no going back. And so for me, I think a couple things come out of that. One, I would like to see more openness in the industry, because I think that we're no longer in a situation where we're well past a situation where nobody's going to have access to this technology. Somebody's going to have access to this technology. And then it becomes a question of, is that remain in the hands of a few extremely powerful tech companies or governments, or is it more democratized? And I think probably the lesser of two evils, which I think both are concerning and have risks. But for me, the lesser of two evils is for it to be in the hands of the masses, so that there's high visibility on it. And so that I think in that regard, there will be more attention given to making sure that actions are taken to mitigate those risks overall. I think I'm optimistically cautious is, I think, the best way to very briefly describe my opinions on artificial intelligence. I think there's a tremendous amount of risk, and I do think that that is something that I intend to highlight with a lot of the episodes that we have, is some of my concerns, both for the immediate present, and then also I think a lot of the episodes are going to look in kind of that futurist perspective of speculating based on current trends, what does lie in the future for artificial intelligence and machine learning. And so I think in that regard, it likely will appeal to people who like science fiction and like the idea of just imagining what the future may hold, because I think there's no question that it's going to be drastically different than what it is today. And I think we just have to take our understanding of what's happening now and the way that things are moving. And I think it's not only entertaining to speculate about what may be the case in the future, but I think it's also prudent and kind of well advised to consider those risks and start having dialogues about those in advance.
And I, having been playing with it for a while, I'm excited for what's possible, and but also very afraid of the areas that you said one might have a little less impact than others. But I'm afraid of it in the hands of the general public. I'm afraid of it in the hands of big corporations. I'm afraid of it in the hands of government, for sure, for different reasons. Because the common thread through all three of those is people. Right, and not everybody has the same intentions.
Well, I think if nothing else, so there was a project recently called Chaos GPT where somebody took basically a service connected version of Chat GPT that is able to take actions autonomously, and they basically gave it the directive of destroy the world. Right now, there's not enough service connections and plugins for Chat GPT to successfully accomplish that objective. But I think it tells you something about human nature that somebody out there was just like, let's try and see what happens.
Let's see where this goes. Yeah.
So I think you're right. People is the big concern in every single one of the possible options.
Yeah. And it could just be as simple as some kid. How many kids can I bully with one one transformer?
Well, do you want to play a game of thermonuclear war? You know, like, I mean, somebody's going to do it. And I want to wrap this conversation because I think your connection between philosophy and AI and technology, as well as some of our other, new show actually on the program, and I am loving having this conversation myself. And I look at this fact that years ago you would talk about, if you were studying philosophy, you were as far as possible on the line of left to right or A to Z from technology.
Right.
I mean, it was either philosophy or math, right, or technology. And now the extreme are going on a circle with touch. And I feel like we talk so much about ethics and philosophy, and in a way, it's a way to know ourselves. Like, as we try to understand artificial intelligence, the truth is we are really trying to understand how are we going to use these tools? What is that knowledge that we're going to put in the machine, and what is the capabilities that we're going to put, which ultimately comes down to, are we going to play thermonuclear war, or are we going to play let's fix the environment and and all the diseases and so forth? And from somebody like you that is going to touch on all of this with a philosophical approach, I cannot wait to honestly listen to all the conversation that you're going to bring on the table.
It's a conversation I'd love to have, but I'm not able. So I'm glad you are.
We'll just listen to it. So
Exactly.
Can you outline maybe some of the topics that you're thinking to bring on in the next episode?
So the immediate next episode that I'm looking at is going to talk about our increasing reliance on technology and artificial intelligence, how we're seeing that progress as new technology is rolled out. It's actually going to draw a parallel between artificial intelligence and the Borg, the collective from Star Trek, and really the whole idea of resistance is futile. You have to assimilate, and I think that we are seeing that both in our personal and professional lives. If we don't adapt, if we don't integrate these capabilities and these skill sets into our own lives, then we fall behind. We get left behind. We're not able to compete. Businesses are not able to compete. Personally, we're not able to compete in the job market. And I think that there are, when you follow that trend to its logical conclusion of where that ends up, I think that is setting a somewhat of a dangerous precedent that as technology increases, we're going to see a situation where we're increasingly losing our own humanity and something about our own level of cognition by that increased reliance on technology. So really excited on pulling that episode together. And I've got a whole list of other ideas that are not on the top of mind. So, but there's definitely more to come, and I'm excited.
Ask ChatGPT.
There you go. Absolutely. If nothing else, it's a great idea generator.
Exactly.
That's right.
Well, very exciting. I'm happy that we took the time to have
Yeah.
this conversation. It was fascinating, the first one that we had, and I'm so glad that I really love when a guest turn into a host, because it means that it clicked. It means that it was already up in the air for something to happen. And this is a topic that, again, like Sean said, we know quite a bit about it, but it sounds to me that you definitely know way more than us. So I am looking forward to listen to all your your episode. And once in a while, I think I'm just gonna knock on your door and say, hey, why don't you come on my show and talk about it?
Absolutely. Anytime.
I have questions.
I have questions. Help me to answer those. But in the meantime, I want to, of course, invite everybody to listen to the first episode, which is fascinating. Already a strong connection between psychology and technology, and it's out there. Your own show. It's available on Spotify, Apple, Google Podcast, and everywhere you listen to your show. And so, for everybody, subscribe. There'll be links, of course, here, and it's easy to find on ITSP Magazine. So, Sean, I'll leave you the honor to wrap these and push the end recording button when you're ready.
I want to thank you, Hutch, for joining us and for bringing this conversation, for taking the time today to give us some insight and where you're planning to take things, so the audience can learn more and follow you. Cybercognition podcast by Hutch, and your profile there. I'm sure folks can reach out to you, because if anybody's like Marco and I, they're going to have questions too. So I presume your show will be one that sparks a lot of engagement. Of, well, why did you think that way, or what about this, and they're not getting the answers they want from ChatGPT. So we'll send them all to Hutch. You can answer them all.
Always excited to have a conversation.
Yeah, love it.
All
All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening and watching this episode, and stay tuned for more from Hutch and more from us and the rest of the family here on ITSPmagazine Podcast Network.
We hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you learned something new and this story made you think, then share ITSP Magazine with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our columns. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.